Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 9 of MBA 590 Digital Marketing. Um, got a bunch of stuff to cover this week, but most of it is related to either the analytical assignment or to the situation analysis. And so I want to kind of talk about that. I'll be talking in more detail. Some of you I've already talked to about your projects. Some of you have, I will be talking to shortly about your projects. So I'm not going to necessarily focus too much on that, but we will be discussing that. So okay. So the thing I do want to talk a lot about today, I'm just getting all my notes ready here, is the analytical assignments, right? And because I've had a number of questions about that as I've been working forward. Um, so um, the first thing, so there are a couple of questions people have been asking about consistently, and I want to address those real quick. So the first question I've gotten several times is about whether or not you can use one of the calculators to calculate the length of test duration, or if you need to do the calculation by hand. And I never prohibit you from using any tools, right? Like, except for actually literally finding, well, I don't think you can even do that. But anyways, I prohibit you, I allow you to use whatever tools you want to use. By submitting the exam, you are acknowledging that it's your own work, but I do allow you to use whatever you want. The calculator, though, is fine to use. Let me just make that, let me kind of not get that confusing. The calculator is fine to use. The problem with it is that if you use it and you have a wrong answer in there someplace, right, it is very, very hard for me to give you partial credit because I don't know if I don't know how much understanding you have of the actual question, right, when you get it wrong. So if you do the calculation by hand, and you show your work, it's much easier for me to give you partial credit along the way, right? So that's the one question I would say. It's free to go ahead and use the calculators if you want. It's just I would recommend doing it by hand just so I can give you partial credit in case you get the answers wrong, right? The next question I've gotten multiple times is about the MRKP framework. So several people have asked for the question about identifying keyword phrases, whether or not how to get the numbers for the maximum return keyword phrase framework, right? And so there's 4 components to that, right? There is the volume of search, there is the amount of competition, there is the likelihood of someone using that keyword to convert, and there is the value of that conversion, that it's a high or low value, right? So the first 2 you can actually get real world data on. So if you were to go to Google AdWords Keyword Planner, which you do have to set up an account. You don't actually have to give them credit card information or anything like that. You do have to set up a Google AdWords account in order to get that. But once you have that account, you can use the keyword planner to assess the information. Or if you want, there is another keyword planner out there called Moz.com. Moz.com is a blog about search engine optimization, but they provide a keyword planner as well. So you could use that too. Anyways, so somewhere you use one of these keyword planners, you can get volume information, you can get competition information, right? The other 2 things you can't necessarily have a specific number for, right? Like there's no way, unless you are actually running the campaign, to know how likely someone is to convert, how likely someone is to be a high value customer. What I want instead is for you to use your intuition and knowledge of research that you do on the topic to try and figure out how likely someone is to convert, and then just explain that, right? So there's some obvious examples, right? Like, and I gave some of these in the video lectures, that if someone is Googling for cheap hotels in Washington, D.C., they are probably not a high lifetime value customer. If someone is Googling for just hotels, Washington, D.C., they're probably less likely to convert than if they Google for, hotel near the waterfront, or hotel near the Capitol, or even Marriott hotels near the Capitol, Washington, D.C., right? Like those people are probably much more likely to convert. So use your own reasoning. You could, if you want, actually assign numerical scores, right? There's nothing stopping you from just saying this, there's a 1 to 5 scale. and putting those 1 to 5 numbers in. As long as the numbers, you're using the same numbers in the same scale for every single one of the keyword phrases, you can compare using the maximal return keyword phrase framework to do this. And in fact, this is the way people actually do decide these things, right? Like if they want to think about how they're going to do SEO for their organization, they generate like 100 possible keywords, and then they use something like the keyword phrase framework to kind of start to figure out which keyword phrases they're actually going to apply the most, right? So this is very much right out of industry and practice as to how they would do, right? Now the other aspect of this, so related to that notion, is the idea that somebody asked the question that they understood the framework, but they weren't sure how to tell what would be a new word versus a word that brand list is already optimizing for. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for the question to appear like you needed to make that decision. Just assume they're not search engine optimizing for any words, and that you want to add some words into it. You want to start optimizing it, right? So don't worry too much about new versus old, right? So that answers that question. Now, one other question I had, so the final question that I had, let's see. Oh, I had another question about question 1, which is about what types of changes do you see in the A/B testing that I see quite a bit. And this question had to do with the fact that people were wondering if you need to only recommend changes to the website, or if you could also recommend changes to social media or to email and things like that. All that's fine, right? So you can recommend changes on any of those levels as long as they can be tested using an A/B test, right? So there would be possible that you could recommend a change that was not easily implementable via an A/B test, right? So make sure that you describe how it could be tested using an A/B test if it's not just a strict website design change, okay? The final question I had about the analytics exam had to do with going over the calculation again. And someone said the audio wasn't very easy to understand on the video. So if that's the case, if more of you are having trouble hearing the audio on that video, let me know. I'll try and update it. Obviously, it's probably too late to do it for this year, but I'll definitely do it for next year, if nothing else. So let me know. Send me an email if you find out that that's the case as well. So I was just going to quickly just run over the calculation again, the way I did it, so that students can better understand it. So let me pull up the slides that have to do with that particular section of the class. Digital marketing slides. 5, yeah, okay. Okay. So let me do this. Window capture off. Let's do this. Yep, and then I'll add in the screen. Okay, here we go. Sorry for the small delay in this. There we go. So you should now see the slide deck, right? And let me turn off my laptop camera and reposition this a little bit better, right? Okay. So this is the actual calculation of doing the test duration calculation for scenario 1, which is that you have 2 variants, an estimated conversion rate of 30%, a relative minimum improvement of 20%. Now, improvements are always given relatively, right? So this means that the absolute minimal improvement would be 36%, right? So because there's a 20% improvement on the current conversion rate, which is 30%, 1.2 times 30 is 36, right? And then 962 is actually what you're going to get out of this calculation. So let me talk through a little bit how I do that. So first of all, this t of alpha divided by 2 plus t of beta, those numbers are just obtained from a traditional statistics lookup table, right? And so in this case, those numbers are 1.96 plus 0.84, right? And if you add those two together, right, you get 2.8, right? So that's the clear calculation there. Now, the person who asked this original question, I'm trying to find it. Asked, let's see, office hours, right? Asked why that calculation does not match the T of alpha, doesn't match the example. So this number is kind of just set in stone. Like, you don't need to recalculate this number ever, right? Like, it's always going to be 1.96 plus 0.84, and that's always going to be 2.08, and then the square of, and I'll double check the square of 2.8, but I think this is all correct. The square of 2.8 is in fact 7.84, which is this number here. So I'm not sure where, I apologize, I don't know where you're not getting that number to match up. They said that they had some trouble matching it. Anyways, so then P1 is 0.3, because that's the original conversion rate. 1 minus P1 is 1 minus 0.3, right? P2 times 1 minus P2, which is up here, is 0.36 times 1 minus 0.036, right? So that feeds in there. And the distance between those two values, right, is 0.36 minus 0.3, which is 0.06, right? And so then 0.3, you get 0.3 times 0.7. Once you carry those out, 0.36 times 0.64, which is this value, right? 0.36 times 1 minus 0.036. And then 0.06 squared is 0.036, right? So 2.8 squared is 7.84, right? 0.3 plus 2.3 times 0.7. Wow, that's not right. 0.3 times 0.7, not plus, is 0.21, and 0.36 times 0.64 is 0.2304, right? So this gets you this value here, and then when you add those two numbers, you get 0.4404, right? 7.84 times 0.4404 is 3.45, and then you divide by 0.036, and that gives you 962. Now that tells you the amount of traffic per variant, right? But there's two variants. So the actual amount of traffic that you need is twice that, right? Roughly, 1922, right? But your traffic per day is 200 individuals. So your traffic per variant per day is going to be 100. So 962, which is the amount of traffic per variant you need to see, is going to be 962 divided by 100, 9.62 or 9.5, rounding down in this particular case, and you round to 9 here, right? So in roughly 9 days, a little bit more than 9 days, almost 10 days, you'll have that example. And there is a command, I don't know how well I detail this, but if you go to R, right, you can just type in power.prop.test, P1 equals 0.3, P2 equals 0.36, significance level 0.05, and power 0.8, and which are the default standards that you get, and you get a similar result out. Now, maybe the thing the person was confused about was that 0.05 divided by 2 is not 1.96, and 0.84 is not 0.08. That's true, right? So these t values up here, the t of alpha of 2 and the t of beta, are not the actual alpha divided by 2 and not the actual beta, but rather the statistical t values associated with those alphas and those betas, right? So it's a little bit different than what you might think. And so those are the values that I plugged in here, not the actual raw values that come out of here. I should also mention that this is one of many ways to do this kind of calculation to compute the n that you need. There are other methods that you could use, and you could obviously use different significant levels and different powers. So some of the online calculators may be using different significant levels in power. I don't know. I know that the VWO one returns a result very similar to the results that I presented here. And they may be using other statistical tests too. The numbers may be slightly different, but they get similar results. So I hope that helps for the person who had trouble hearing that and they couldn't hear the audio on the original one. But hopefully this is explanatory. Let me see. So let me switch back now to my video. Okay. So that's all I wanted to cover for the analytical assignment. If people have other questions who are watching on the YouTube chat right now, please feel free to type them in. I will be talking about a couple other things for a while. I'm happy to come back and talk about the analytics. If you have other questions also about the course, then that's fine. With regards to the situation analysis and marketing goals, now that I've had a chance to look over most of them, right, the one comment I would make is, again, try to realize that your audience is not necessarily me, right? It's actually the firm that you're working with, right? And so you should be writing in a voice as if you're talking to that firm, right? And so that might mean things like that you say, we recommend that the target market focus in this area, right? As opposed to saying, we were told that the target market. Now, it might be that when you've been talking to that firm, they want to target that market, in which case you can say, you know, after conversations with the firm, we've identified this target market, right? That's fine, right? But just try to make sure that you're writing in a way that if you were a consultant who is asked to generate a marketing plan for a firm, this document would be the kind of document you would give to the firm, right? Some of the language I've seen has so far been more of just directly answering questions and not enough talking to the firm, right? Trying to think if there's any other questions. No, actually, the SMART goals, most of them looked really good. I would say the one thing I would say is that maybe, you know, be as specific as you can be. I think some of them were maybe a little bit under-specified at times, right? So just try and be more specific. Now, that brings me up to the next section, which is going to be the tactics and implementation. And as you go forward to the next section on tactics and implementation, one thing I really want you to keep in mind is I would rather have a strong, consistent document focused on a few ideas that were well developed than a really broad and kind of nebulous document that covered just about every topic under the sun, right? And so I think it's very important that you make sure that you try and focus your ideas a little bit. Choose a couple of marketing tactics that you really want to emphasize, and you don't even need to mention some of them. For instance, the podcasting is one that I think a lot of firms aren't even going to bother with. So you might want to just not even mention podcasting, and that's going to make your recommendations a lot crisper and cleaner as you go forward. I think that's the important thing of what I want to say for the tactics and implementation for now. So let's go quickly over then what is there to do this week, right? So this week, you should look over your grades on the situation analysis and marketing goals and come prepared to be in the group conference to discuss that. You're going to finish and turn in your analytical assignment, which is due by 11:55 p.m. Tomorrow, right? So that's tomorrow, March 15th, right? And then the one last thing is once you've done that, there is a new Top Hat discussion on creative bravery and content marketing that's up online. It's really cool. It's about kind of ways that agencies are really embracing digital media to create interesting content, right? So take a look at that, see what you think of those discussions, and that's the main point. And that's all the topics for this week, right? Next week, we'll be diving into content marketing. I gave you this kind of week off, essentially, because with the group conferences, coming back from spring break, etc., right, it gives you some time to get back into the course. But next week, we'll be diving back into content marketing, and the slides are already up, or the slides and videos are already up. And in fact, there's a bonus video because I was able to interview the head of marketing for a marketing automation company recently, Amit Bavas, and so that'll be your bonus video for next week. Yeah, and the next video should be up shortly. Actually, I realized today I can kind of release them almost immediately. I just want to double check some things. So that'll be for the week after week 9, which week after week 10, because week 10 is the content marketing and writing for digital. So week 11 will be on, I believe it's just on display advertising. Let's see, real quick. Week 10 is, week 11 is just going to be on display advertising. So you'll get a section on display advertising for next week. Okay. You'll see the videos on display advertising up shortly, and along with that, there will be a new short video on Google AdWords and how to use it, because I think that'll be the good key way into that. It's not really about display advertising; it's more about the pay-per-click stuff that we already talked about. But I think it's necessary, and it gives you. It is a similar platform to the platform that you would use for display advertising. So I think it kind of gives you a good sense of that. So that will also be what to look for. So anyways, again, turn in your analytical assignment tomorrow. Review your situation analysis and marketing goals. Come to your group conferences so we can discuss all this, and we'll start working. Read over the creative bravery and content marketing thought piece that's up online from Google Think. By the way, the places that's from Google Think, it's called Think with Google. They're really cool. If you're really into digital marketing, I highly recommend signing up for their newsletters, and you just get this like weekly email about things Google is thinking about. It's basically their intellectual thought leadership on digital advertising. So with that, I think I've answered all the questions that have come up. If there's any more out there, let me know. Just quickly checking to see if anything has come through. I think that's it. Okay, cool. Take care, everyone. If any other questions come up, please feel free to shoot me an email. And I look forward to talking to you next week. Take care.